Preserving historic buildings is an important aspect of preserving our history and our community. We'll talk to Indiana Landmarks, the City of Evansville's Historic Preservation Officer, and someone who has helped renovate some of the most significant historic buildings in our area. That's next on WNIN Newsmakers. Welcome, I'm Philip R. Hooper. Here to talk about the importance of preserving historic buildings is Stephanie Richard, recently named Director of the Southwest Office of Indiana Landmarks. Stephanie, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So I was very excited when I heard that you were taking this role. I think a great question for folks who don't know is tell us, what does Indiana Landmarks do? What does the organization do?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, we don't have 2 days worth of time because Indiana Landmarks does a ton of things in Indiana. But the short story is that it's a statewide nonprofit organization that works in historic preservation. And if you really wanted to simplify the mission of the organization, it's to save places. And so that means buildings and monuments and places that are important to all of the people in Indiana. And what really makes Indiana Landmarks the premier organization of its kind in the whole entire country here in Indiana is the fact that it has 9 regional offices throughout the state. Mm-hmm. And so I'm in one of those offices, the Southwest Field Office.
Outstanding. I know this is a big question, but it's a great question to unpack. Mm-hmm. Tell us why historic preservation and preserving those places is so important.
Yeah, I knew that was going to be a question today. It's not a black and white situation, mm-hmm. right? But let's think about the culture of a place, the identity of a place, and what makes a community a community. Your memories and your family are tied to specific places in where those things happened. And even the collective memories of a city like Evansville, all of those things, all those events, all those people were in specific places, and you don't want to just replace all of that with pole barns, for example. Sure. It means something. It helps people identify mm-hmm. with the place that they are and the place that they were from.
I love that you mentioned pole barns. I certainly see it as part of making a quality place. Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think one of my favorite memories of kind of what you're saying about people interacting with the building and the meaning of it was with the Greyhound building, thinking mm-hmm. of how many people had gone in and out of that building on traveling, some dire situations, leaving for Vietnam, maybe not coming back.
Yeah.
And when the community was able to save that building, that was a great example of a building that was so much more than a building. It really did connect to people's lives.
Yeah, that's a great example.
Cool.
Yeah.
So every year, Indiana Landmarks is great about releasing the top 10 most endangered buildings, the top 10 list.
Yes.
And this year's list features the Salmon School Building in Fort Branch. Can you tell us more about that building?
Yeah, actually, folks will want to know that it's in Snake Run.
Ooh, nice.
Snake Run,
in Snake Run.
Yes.
Is that a neighborhood in Fort Branch?
I am not from Snake Run, so I don't want to.
Is Snake Run a creek? Is that a creek?
Snake Run is a creek, but it's also a community. So, which is why the school is there, right? Yeah, it's the last remaining one-room schoolhouse in Gibson County.
Okay.
So that alone makes it important to save. But yeah, at one time throughout this part of the state and probably throughout the country, but I'm not an expert on that. These one-room schoolhouses were important centers for the community because not only did school happen there, but, fairs and, public gathering kind of things. But anyway, this one-room schoolhouse still exists in Snake Run, close to Fort Branch, and it is not in good shape. It is continuously having water infiltration and weather infiltration. So action does need to be taken. And one of the great things about the top 10 most endangered, at first glance, you're like, oh, all those buildings are in terrible shape or whatever, but it does bring awareness to those buildings that do need some immediate attention. It can act to sort of catalyze the community around that particular building, and all of a sudden people are like, oh gosh, we do need to do something about this before it's lost forever. So it's an important tool for Indiana Landmarks and for Indiana.
Who owns the one-room schoolhouse building?
It's privately owned right now, and his. I don't know if I'm gonna get this right, but I think it's, let's see, his mother went to school there, her father was a teacher there, and I can't remember if it's his father was also a teacher or if it was his father that built the school, but it's been connected to that family since the very beginning.
Wow, that's tremendous. So I hope they can pull that off. Hope we, the community, can pull that off.
Right, yeah, I hope so too.
So you mentioned buildings on the top 10 list being in poor repair. Sometimes they're buildings that you could drive by and not realize they're endangered. I think a great example of that is the Holman building. Now, it's not on the list this year, but it's been featured a few times in the past. It's a concern among Evansvillers.
Yes.
Is there any progress on that building you can talk about, or what is the importance of that building, but also can you give us some hope?
Well, I do want to point out that the top 10 list, obviously we track those buildings through time, not just while they're on the top 10 list. And if something is removed from the list, doesn't necessarily mean that we're not concerned about it anymore.
Sure.
Holman is an example of that. We still keep close eyes on that building. It sounds like there's something in the works. Yeah. Perhaps.
I know developments of that sort are complicated and take a long time, but it's
especially
encouraging to hear you say they're trying. They're not there's not a lack of effort, and there's conversations happening. That's
definitely great. Not a lack of effort, definitely not a lack of interest.
So maybe one last question. Think of a success story in our region from a top 10 list in the past. What are some success stories that pop out in your brain? I almost said mind, and then I switched to brain.
Well, I mean, one example that's, of course, close to my heart and also yours, I'm sure, is the Owen Block building.
Oh, yeah. Cheers to the Owen Block.
Some people might know that I used to previously worked with architectural renovators, and in that capacity, we worked in conjunction with Indiana Landmarks and a community effort, right, to keep that building from being torn down, because it was in bad shape, and now there are people living there, and it's a beautiful building. It
is beautiful. In 20 seconds, how can people support Indiana Landmarks?
Okay, 20 seconds. First of all, be a member. That will keep you informed in what's happening with Indiana Landmarks. And secondly, I would say just pay attention to what's happening in your community and make it a conversation. Thanks.
Stephanie, always great to chat about old buildings with you.
Yeah, the same.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Our next guest is Timothy Miller, Historic Preservation Officer for the City of Evansville. Timothy, thanks for being here. So, Timothy, tell us what is the purpose of the historic preservation districts in the city? So you've got areas of the city, and we call them a historic district. They might have rules, they might not. Can you kind of explain that lay of the land for us?
Okay, so the city has two preservation districts. We have Riverside and Lincolnshire historic districts. The Riverside district has a very encompassing regulation guidelines for them to preserve the integrity of the district, and also does things like help maintain real estate value, has other benefits in the neighborhood.
Now, where is the Riverside district for folks that don't know?
The Riverside district is the preservation area is from Adams Street all the way up to Walnut.
Okay.
And then it has a kind of a zigzag boundary from there.
Yeah.
And then Lincolnshire preservation area is the Lincolnshire Historic District, not including the school there at the south end of the
Bossy
Historic District. Yes.
Yeah, so the area there around Bossy. Okay, great. So what is the purpose then of the Preservation Commission for these districts? So you've got two preservation areas, one with a stricter set of rules, one with a less strict set of rules. What's the purpose of this?
The Preservation Commission receives applications for alterations to houses. If there's a severe alteration that needs to be done, either because the owner wants to or because the need is there, the Preservation Commission will have to approve that. Basically, anytime a historic element is either being altered or changed or replaced, that level needs to be approved by the commission.
Okay.
If it's a lesser alteration, that's something I can approve through my office with either just a note or actually a signed application of appropriateness.
And there are little fees for that, like you get a permit fee to build a mini barn or build an addition or build a house. There's different permits you need. You get a drainage permit, structural permit, and there's fees for those. Are there fees for these approvals as well?
For the staff level certificate of appropriateness and the commission level, there are fees for that. One's $10, one's $25, and that's just your application fee involved for that.
So it sounds like to me that you go get a permit. If you're in this district, you pay a marginal amount more, and then you get some advice from the commission of how to make it appropriate. As someone who lives in the preservation district in Riverside, I certainly appreciate the quality control aspect of it. You know, it's nice knowing that the commission is there to make sure that there's a high level of quality, and I consider it almost free architectural advice, on your projects. What are some requirements? We hear about the National Register of Historic Places, which is different than the Evansville Historic Preservation Commission. What are some requirements to qualify for the National Register, and kind of what does that all do? Tell us about the National Register.
So to be qualified for the National Register, the property has to be at least 50 years old.
Okay.
Then it has to have significance involved with it. Either it has to be significant with some sort of event or pattern events, a person, or it has to be the architecture. And then there's other levels which are more dealing with archaeology.
So the house has to look really awesome and be super cool. If the house is less cool, somebody super cool had to live in it?
More or less.
Kind of? Cool.
The significance can be, yes, more towards the association of a person or an event that happened there rather than the integrity of the building. Sometimes it can have lower integrity as a building, but the significance so high that it's still considered eligible.
You work for the city of Evansville. You're a city employee. But what are some other organizations that you might work with for these historic preservation goals?
I work with Indiana Landmarks. I go to the Vanderbilt County Historical Society meetings.
Great.
I go to local neighborhood meetings as I'm invited. And I've been trying to invite myself to those neighborhood meetings when I meet people and they tell me they have those.
Yeah.
And then my contact information is on the city website. So if you have a local neighborhood meeting, then you'd like me to join or come sit in the meetings or speak, please let me know. Great.
Well, what else, is there anything else that you would like people to know about historic preservation in Evansville?
I'm looking forward to this position and the work I've been doing, and I'm still actively working my way through all these historic districts that we have to learn more about them, and then just working with the neighborhoods and promoting historic preservation in those neighborhoods as a means of improvement of those neighborhoods.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for being here, Timothy. It was great talking to you.
Thank you.
And cheers to historic preservation. Now joining us is Carrie Niehaus, who has worked on renovating several older buildings here in Evansville. Carrie, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
So, Carrie, you know a lot about buildings, old buildings, working with architectural renovators for years now.
Yes.
Having lived in an old home yourself for many years. What draws you to working on older buildings?
It's, I guess, a passion to keep something that's old looking nice.
Okay, so it's a fun challenge?
Yeah, it is, really.
Is there something about those buildings that you prefer?
I don't think it's anything that I prefer. It's just it's funner working on something that you can bring back from it being destroyed and not something new that is more cookie cutter.
You're a sucker for redemption.
Yeah.
What are some of the projects you've worked on here in Evansville? I know the list is long, but...
Yeah. Wright's Home was one. We've done a number of projects at the Wright's Home. Owen Block, that one really should have been tore down.
We saved it.
Yes, we did. I mean, first time I went in the basement, and I could see all the way through to the sky from the basement.
Tell us a little more about how you guys did save that. I understand there was some pretty significant reworking of the structure in a kind of creative way.
Yeah, the back right corner was, the whole corner was starting to buckle out. So we literally dug down, put a reinforced steel rebar structure in, and then plywooded that, poured that thing full of concrete. And then we re-bricked it to make it kind of look like a chimney instead of this big piece of concrete sticking out the back corner. Wow. So it looks more like a chimney now than it would have if we had just left it the concrete.
That's great. And is it correct to say that you guys built a load-bearing wood frame structure inside of the old brick to let the old brick rest on the new load-bearing structure?
Yeah. There was a lot of structural inside that was completely decayed. A lot of new floor joists had to go in.
Right.
And then reworked everything where you could, instead of it being 3 townhouses at one time, it was turned into apartments,
right.
Smaller apartments.
Right. Yeah, I remember seeing a lot of concrete going in that project.
Yes, and then he pulled the front wall out to give us more of a walking area in the bottom.
Okay.
3 apartments, and you got more of a nice little sitting area down there now where it was too thin to do that before, so we pulled everything out more towards the street.
Well, having seen some of the other proposals to save that building, I thought what you guys did was very creative.
Yeah.
Very good. What are some benefits of renovating an old building versus building a new house? You know, are there benefits of an old house versus a new house?
Well, a new house you have to build from scratch. The old house, you've got the structure there. You just got to reinforce the structure that's there and make it livable again.
Yeah. So maybe it's easier for a DIYer to save an old house versus by themselves. Yeah. Versus you're going to be hard pressed to construct a new house.
Yeah. Unless you're an architect or something and know how to do that from scratch. Yeah. Me, I was fortunate with our house. It had, like I said, hadn't been lived in for over 10 years. The structure was there. We just had to redo the inside and bring it back up. Yeah. Put more modern amenities in.
Gotcha. We see a lot, you see it on Facebook, you might have seen the diagram of the old 2x4 versus the new 2x4, you know, the grain strength. Do you buy into that as well? You think there's some other benefits of an old house, some of the quality of materials?
Oh, yeah, the material that they used back then is just more substantial than it is now. I mean, to get a 2x4 strength now, you basically have to use two 2x4s to get the strength that you had in an old 2x4.
Yeah, that's amazing. So what are some considerations that you would recommend somebody make if somebody's planning to renovate, get an old house? You know, they've seen it on TV, they've seen it on This Old House, and now they want to do their own This Old House. You know, what advice would you have for them? What considerations would you suggest they
Just
have?
make sure you know what you're getting into, because structurally, if it's not structurally sound, you're going to spend tons and tons of money to get it structurally sound. I mean, we were fortunate ours was in pretty good shape. The addition needed quite a bit of work, but it's just do your due diligence and
Gotcha.
make sure you know what you're getting into.
Good stuff. What is, and you can't say Owen Block because we've already talked about it, what is one of your most favorite projects that you've got to work on for architectural renovators?
I would say the St. Mary's Church.
Oh yeah, tell me about that. I'm not as familiar with that.
We did a lot of the outside work. They had another company do the structural stuff inside,
Okay.
but we did most of the work on the outside. I've noticed just recently, this past year, that they put a whole new roof on. We've done a lot of repair on that slate roof through the years.
Beautiful.
But yeah, they did a tremendous job. I guess Owen Block was another one, or not Owen Block, Audubon. I mean, that was kind of a unique building. I guess whenever the military came back, that was used, I guess, like for military men and that
Okay,
stayed
yeah.
there for a while.
Well, I'm glad you said that. I didn't realize you worked on those buildings at Audubon State Park.
No, Audubon, down on
Oh, sorry.
Riverside and Adams.
We're talking about the Audubon apartment building.
Yes, yes,
So
yes.
it was chopped up into multiple units. And
Yeah,
you
the
had a lot of heavy
basement,
work to
the
get that done.
basement had like communal showers, communal
Wow. Yeah.
sinks, where you had a sleeping room, and then you'd go down to the basement to.
Like a barrack.
Yeah.
Yeah,
mhm.
okay. Well, you can see that. You can see that at Adams and Riverside there,
Yes.
that beautiful brick building with balconies. Carrie, thank you so much for joining
Yes.
us and talking a little bit about old buildings with
Thank
us
you.
today. All righty. Thanks to our guests for joining us today to talk about the importance of historic preservation. I'm Philip R. Hooper, and thanks for watching another episode of WNIN Newsmakers.